Hi, everyone. My name's Ian Coletti. I'm the founder and head coach of Legacy High Performance. And today, I have a friend and a client of mine, Malia, who is joining me today. We're going to talk about talent acquisition. Malia has a background in that, and as we've been talking with some other folks in that space, it seemed like there was a good opportunity to talk about um, all things talent acquisition, state of affairs, and et cetera. So, uh, without further ado, Malia, I just want to introduce you and just tell us about yourself, where you're from, and what got you started in talent acquisition.
Yeah, no, thanks, Ian. It's really great to be here. I have been in talent acquisition for about close to 20 years now. Took a little break in the middle there for a bit, but back when I started, my career actually was in sales. I was an account manager for a hospitality company, and I was searching for something that was a little bit more meaningful and fulfilling for myself, and came across an ad for relationship sales. And when I saw the ad, I thought, gosh, that's really what's been missing from my current role. I felt like the sales I was in was very transactional, and I just really wanted to connect the dots and have more fulfilling connections with people. So ended up getting the job as a recruiter, knew nothing about it, dove right in, was trained, and basically started working at it from the ground up. Now, back then it was the 90s. We actually didn't even have personal computers on our desks. We had terminals, and I had a Rolodex and a fax
Oh,
machine and a telephone,
wow.
a landline. So back when I started, it was very rudimentary. We were dialing for dollars, as we used to call it. And I had a lot of coffees with candidates. I had a lot of lunches and really just worked on building my pipeline of people that I knew and people that I could connect with and call upon whenever I had a job opportunity. Back then, it was kind of a unique landscape. There really wasn't a lot of companies that invested in an in-house talent acquisition department. Most of the time, the human resources were tasked with that role, and so they ended up outsourcing it. So we really had a lot of great opportunities. I was in a staffing company at the time, so
Mhm.
that's where it all started.
Awesome. I know you've talked about talent acquisition and what it means to you. So, talk to me about that. What does talent acquisition and that function that you're in mean to you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. For me personally, developing relationships and connecting the dots between the people and the jobs and the departments and the goals, all of those things align. It's just magical. And to expand upon my background, after I left the staffing world, I went into the corporate world and have been in that world since 2012. And I find that no matter what type of company that you're in, whatever industry, it's all about building relationships. And obviously, I'm now a manager, and I'm not handling a full deck of recs myself. Occasionally that does happen, but most of the time I'm managing a team and I'm working with the business on strategy. And that is super fulfilling in itself. But what I really love is working with my team. I love helping them continue to grow and learn, and just seeing them get their wings and fly in their roles. That's super fulfilling for me. And it's still all about the people and making those connections. So
Hmm, awesome. I believe you mentioned that you build some relationships with the candidates and prospects and people that get hired themselves. Tell me a little bit more about that.
well, back in the early days when we didn't have a LinkedIn, I had to really forge relationships from the ground up, and a lot of times it was introductions or cold calls, and I would meet people, um, and I always would ask a lot of personal questions, but not too personal. But I really wanted them. I wanted to get to know them and for them to get to know me, and so I would always divulge things about myself and develop relationships with people. It wasn't just a candidate hiree relationship. It was I'm here. I'm a friend. I'm here to help. I want to help you get the most out of your career, and I'm going to help you find something when that day comes. And sometimes I would stay in touch with candidates for years, 2 or 3 years, and then an opportunity would come along, and I would reach out to them and say, "Hey, I've got this great job, and I thought of you first. I know it's been 3 or 4 months since we last talked, and this is a great opportunity for you." And I would hire those folks. And it was really rewarding to me to see those relationships come to fruition. And that's not where it stopped. I mean, I still have candidates that I run into every now and then around town, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, I knew you when. We've known each other now for 20 years. I can't believe it." And just having that history and those relationships with people is just super rewarding.
Awesome. Yeah, I recall you telling me about that, some 20 odd year relationships. I thought that was pretty amazing. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. So, just moving on, 2023, it's been a tough year for a lot of folks. It's a lot of folks have been laid off in the tech sector. There've been hundreds of thousands of people laid off. I'm one of them. I was laid off in February of this year. And now, for me personally, it turned out to be a good thing. I ended up making a massive pivot to something that I personally found more fulfilling. But I also, you were affected by this as well. So tell us a little bit about that and how that's impacted you.
Yeah, I know I was part of a company-wide layoff in June, and I was laid off along with many others in the talent acquisition group. And it's a difficult situation. It's You start to doubt yourself. You start to have negative thoughts, but what right away I organized a support group with the folks that were laid off, and we would meet once a week at first over Zoom to just support one another and encourage one another and help each other out with connections and resume review and things like that. And I think that really helped gain a positive attitude about what was before us.
Mm,
um, Talent acquisition right now, I think, has really been affected maybe a little bit more than other sectors out there. I know Google recently laid off thousands of recruiters, and it's really disheartening to see how many people that I know personally are floating around right now trying to find work, and some longer than me. So it's one that I'll never take a job for granted. And for as long as I live.
right. Well, so tell me about the process you've been going through yourself, and now that you're on the kind of the other side of the fence, as if you will.
Yeah, anytime you're faced with this kind of situation, you start to reevaluate. Well, what do I really want to do? What are my transferable skills, and what do I want to do for work? What do I find most fulfilling? And for me, I found that I still really love what I do, so that's something I right away wanted to focus on. But I also thought of, maybe there's some other roles in the people world or HR world that I could pivot to. And so
Hmm.
I worked with a friend to help create a different version of my resume that might be a little bit more transferable to those types of roles, but then another one that's targeted mainly to talent acquisition leadership positions. Um, I have been looking in every nook and cranny you can think of. As a recruiter, we're kind of uniquely equipped for this type of situation. We know how to do our Boolean searches and set up our job alerts, and we know how to network. Um, I think what was a little bit disheartening for me at the very beginning is I started going through my network of people that I know in talent acquisition, and there's a lot, and to come to find out that many of those people were also looking, and they just hadn't flipped their picture on their LinkedIn profile to say that they were looking. So it was a little, it caught me a little off guard, because at first I didn't realize how many people were affected by the current situation. But it is what it is at the moment. And so every day I get up with a positive attitude, no matter how many rejection emails I have. And I just keep going forward, still looking for jobs, continue networking. I think I'm up to about 300 applications right now,
Wow.
in the last 3-ish months. And I've only had a couple interviews, and this is interesting for someone who's has a lot of experience and I've been in this marketplace for a really long time. It just goes to show you how much competition there is out there right now. And from what I've been hearing, most companies are getting thousands of resumes within 24 hours. And oftentimes I see a job pulled down after 24 hours. So you have to actually apply very quickly if you want your resume to even get in and under consideration. So
Mhm. What ways are you working to stand out as a candidate for a talent acquisition role?
that's a tough one because I think we all have similar ways of doing things, but because we all have LinkedIn, we can, like many people, I reevaluated my LinkedIn. I updated that. I added some new skills, tried to make the verbiage on there sound a little bit fresh for the moment. I'm also trying to follow up with people on LinkedIn after I send an application. I try to find out who I might know at that company that could put a good word in for me.
Mhm.
I also might see if I can find out who the hiring manager is and send them a nice email, letting them know how interested I am and a little bit about my background. Um, I also have been using AI to um, just check my resume and see if I like the verbiage or, suggesting some changes on there and adapting it best I can for the role that I'm applying for. Um, those are like the biggest things that I'm doing right now. And then networking is the biggest. Next to that, I probably making, I don't know, at least 2 or 3 new connections a week for folks that might be a good person for me to meet, might be able to pass me on to another person because you just never know. And I know people who've had interviews for jobs that weren't even posted and they just got it through a network. So that's something I'm hopeful for.
Well, thanks for explaining that. I think this is what you're explaining for yourself as a talent acquisition professional is very apropos for anybody that's looking for a job, at least in my experience. I know I was reading a post on LinkedIn the other day with a gentleman by the name of Justin Walsh, and he was talking about the open to work. What you were talking about earlier, the little label you can put on your profile picture. He said, not necessarily skip that, but um, if you really want to stand out, especially in this hyper competitive market, do things like um, creating content and creating articles, commenting on posts and things like that. Is that something that you would agree with as a good strategy?
Yeah, I think people have to do whatever feels comfortable for them because I don't think you want to go out there and try to present a face that maybe is not authentic and not yourself. For me, I was fine flipping it to the open to work. I know that from the recruiter standpoint, they can search on that function. So if I was an in-house recruiter and I was looking for someone, I could actually search for people who had that on their LinkedIn profile. And those would be the people I would probably go to first because they're going to respond the quickest.
Hmm.
So I think that is great. I also did a really genuine, like heartfelt post after I was laid off to let my network know that I was on the market and that I was looking, and I got a lot of support through that. Probably need to do another one at this point, but the other thing is with posting articles or things, writing social posts. I think some people are really drawn to that and some people are really good at that and other people aren't. It's not something that I've like really embraced. Like I have no problem commenting on a post, but I'm probably not the biggest poster on LinkedIn. um, but again, I have to be authentically me when it comes to what I'm doing on the internet. I don't want to try to be something that I'm not. So, but I would encourage people to definitely be who they are and get the word out however they want to do that on LinkedIn, because I think that there is a pretty large audience there and you just never know what person might see you that day and might reach out to you. So
Right. Cool. Thanks. Uh, I wanted to double click on something you said earlier about the use of AI in your resume. I thought that was pretty pretty cool that you said that and that you use that as a tool, and especially in this day and age. I mean, ChatGPT and Bard and other AI tools are that's the hot new thing. So can you just describe a little bit more how you used AI? Or what did you do in terms of the process?
Yeah, it's something actually I'm really just starting to adopt. So I'm not like 100% like proficient with it yet, but I've been kind of out there searching for what tools there might be for job searchers out there. And I did come across one called Job Scan. And
Hmm.
it's kind of cool. You can, I hope that's okay if I mention the name, but you can put in your resume and you can put in like the job ad and it will show you like what you might need to update on your resume or change the wording of. So that was kind of neat. And then there's another one I'm trying to recall the name of it, but I can't at the moment. But it actually helped reformat my resume so that it would be absorbed by an ATS easier. It's not necessarily like looking for keywords, but one thing I was having trouble with is my format. Sometimes I'd have to go back in and re-add some things or take some
Mhm.
things out because it was either too long or the wording or had too much punctuation in it or bullet points and it just wasn't being absorbed by some of the ATSs out there. So
Mhm.
I was able to redo my resume just recently for that using that tool.
Right. And for those of you non-talent acquisition folks, ATS is an applicant tracking system. So I knew what you were saying. I've spent a number of years in the staffing world myself. So, but thank you for explaining that. That's really neat, and I think that shows some creativity in how to get yourself to stand out. And in this day and age, again, the hyper competitive market, you have to really do what you need to do to make your resume shine or be parsed correctly in an ATS, which is I think the technical term for that. So yeah, thanks for explaining that. So another thing I know that we had discussed at some point was some observations about the talent. And now that you yeah, on the receiving end, right? You mentioned the number of applications that you had submitted. um, I know when you submit an application, clearly you get some sort of an initial automated response, but then there's and I've talked to a number of folks that are in the same situation that are waiting to hear back. And we talked about that. Could you just go in a little, what's been your experience with hearing back
Well,
or not?
I have a Google Doc where I have tracked every role I've applied to, and I
Mhm.
change them to red once I get a rejection email. And there are quite a few actually that I've just have not heard anything from. Um, I think every company has their own philosophy, or maybe every recruiter has their own philosophy of how they work their desk and how they just position candidates throughout the process.
Mhm.
I imagine that the ones that I haven't heard anything back, they were just so overwhelmed by the amount of resumes that they just like filled the job and closed it out. But a lot of applicant tracking systems have a way to automatically disposition people once the job has been filled. And I guess maybe some don't. So that could be why people never hear back. They just kind of are still in limbo because somebody didn't move them to a different stage in the system. Um, I also think that there's some job ads out there that aren't real.
Mhm.
There's some ads that I see floating out there from June when I was laid off that are still out there today, and
Mhm.
I'm concerned that there are some companies out there that are either just fishing for talent and not actually hiring, which is not great, especially in the market that we're in right now. Um, but yeah, it's disheartening to never hear back on an application. I think even if you get a no, it's at least something, it's closure. So
Hmm. Hmm. So, because you're a leader in the talent acquisition space and have held a number of leadership positions, I know you have potentially have some guidance you would like to share with leaders of talent acquisition at various companies that you just mentioned or at least referenced, what would be what would be your either wish list or advice you would give to leaders of talent acquisition or people ops or whatever function that might be in the company? What would be your feedback?
Well, just from a job hunter standpoint, but someone who actually knows a little bit of behind the scenes of how everything works, my thoughts are that if they could coach their recruiting team to maybe unpost the role before they get too overwhelmed with the number of applications, get caught up on who's a fit, who's not, and then if you still need more, repost it again and then do the same thing. It's instead of letting that job just remain open for weeks on end and then being overwhelmed with 5,000 resumes that you're never going to be able to go through, it's or never be able to disposition at some point. um, I would say just, find a way to disposition everybody in the talent pool for those jobs so that they have closure on those roles, because I know a lot of people do keep track of the roles that they're applying to. It's not just me, and I know unemployment actually requires it. So it
Hmm.
it would be very nice if people took a little bit more attention to detail around that piece of it.
Hmm. Anything else you'd like to share from a wouldn't it be nice if um, advice standpoint?
The other funny thing that I've noticed is a lot of companies, not necessarily on the West Coast, but other parts of the US, where they're requiring all kinds of human resources, degrees, and certifications. Talent acquisition people don't come from those backgrounds. If they do, it's very rare. And I just think it's a silly requirement. And then I think also getting really crisp on what they're looking for, like having their basic qualifications mean these are our basic, not our preferred or our wish list, but getting very crisp on what they're looking for so that as a job seeker, we know exactly what the bar is and we can make sure that we're qualified before applying. I've seen some very nebulous job descriptions where it's not real clear what kind of background they're looking for, except that they want talent acquisition or leadership experience. So yeah, that would be my recommendation.
And so I know for and I appreciate that. I'm sure a lot of folks would are nodding their head if they're listening to this from what you just said. Um, I know that in some roles there are various application tests that like for if you're a technical resource that you have to do a coding test or whatever it may be. Um, have you seen have you seen anything like that for your type of role?
Yeah, I've actually seen some interesting things. Well, I had a few applications that I did a while back where they were asking for me to provide strategy around a problem. They wanted to know how I would solve the problem. That was part of the application process. And I did it, I filled it out, but I was thinking, oh, they just got free work from my application. The other thing I had recently was an assessment test, and it had nothing to do with talent acquisition. It was a math problem solving test that was timed and a personality profile test. The whole thing was 50 pages long. Um, it was it was crazy, and I did the best I could. I have no idea like what the results were, but had nothing to do with talent acquisition. So I just don't know why people don't just pick up the phone and have a conversation with people, and why this is something that they're using as a bar for a talent acquisition position.
Hmm. Would that be another piece of advice or counsel you would give to leaders in the talent acquisition space for each company?
Yeah, I mean, I think the type of work that we do, it is a very human-centric role. So you really need to be able to ask a person questions about how they would handle certain situations or what experience they've had in the past to really get to know them. There's no way you could get this from an assessment test that has no bearing on talent acquisition, and to use that as a bar. And I would just encourage people to read between the lines the best they can on resumes and just reach out and have a phone conversation with a candidate, because you never know. Some of us are not great resume writers. We do our best, we try to get it all down. But I think at the end of the day, like, the more phone conversations that a company will have with candidates to discover who these people are behind the piece of paper, the better off they might be in choosing the right person.
Hmm. And I'm wondering if this was even a mistake for the one that you were talking about. I mean, a math test seems kind of
No, they were very,
odd to me.
yeah, they were very clear it was for which role it was for. So I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows? Well, I really appreciate you sharing all that you've shared. I'm sure again that there are folks that are not in talent acquisition roles probably here appreciate hearing some of what you're saying just out of sympathy alone. But if just kind of end on a positive note, what's one positive thing you can take away from this experience?
Gosh, that's a really hard question. I love working, and being at home has a little bit more than I normally would, has been a little bit of a struggle. But I would say that there are always silver linings in every situation. And I would say that I've had more time to spend with family, which has been great. I love my family, and we've been able to spend more time together. And my dogs are definitely benefiting from me not working as much. um, and I've been able to keep my house a little cleaner. So, always a silver lining. But yeah, and I'm sure there's more. Um, I think also just having an opportunity to think about where my next role might be, and just being so really hopeful and optimistic that there's a great job around the corner for me, and a company out there that's willing to take a chance.
Right. And I know you've also had an opportunity to potentially mentor as well along the way. Is that correct?
A little bit. I have some people that I worked with that I've been able to help and encourage along the way, and um, not a whole lot of mentoring really, but really more of just encouragement, and giving them some um, pointers on where to go, but nothing too deep.
Okay. Well, I know that just the advice and feedback you've given through your experience as recently as again is probably helpful to a lot of folks again not in the recruiting role or talent acquisition role. So I thank you for that, and I think it was very insightful. So, Leah, thank you. I want to thank you so much for taking the time out here on a Thursday afternoon in the Seattle area to give your tell your story and the kind of your view of the state of affairs of talent acquisition. So, thank you very much, Leah, for your time.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Ian. I just want to do one short little plug for you that Ian has been my high performance coach over the last few months, and he's great. And he asked some very insightful questions. And I'm digging deep here on my journey to my next role, and working on becoming a better person, and even a higher performer than I already am. So thank you, Ian.
Well, all shucks. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I did not pay her to say that, folks. Um, thank you, Malia. That was awesome. So, thank you again. And for everybody watching this, thank you for your time and have an awesome rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers.